Incline my wandering heart to thee. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, Lord, take and seal it for thy courts above. All else I adore your name. Above all else, to my heart to sing your praise. Above all else, I adore your name. Above all else, to my heart to sing your praise. We sing above all else, I adore your name. Above all else, to my heart to sing your praise. Above all else, I adore your name. Above all else, to my heart to sing your praise. The highest praise, the highest praise. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel. Prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, take and seal it for thy courts above.
Come, let us sing for joy to the Lord. Come, let us shout to the rock of salvation. Yeah. Come before him with thanksgiving, yeah, and extol him with music and song. Come let us, hey, come let us bow down in worship. Come let us kneel before God our Creator. Come let us before God our Creator. For the Lord Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as you did in Meribah, as you did that day in the desert. There your fathers tested me, though they had seen what I had done. For 40 years I was angry with them, angry with that generation. I said they have gone astray, I said they have not known my ways. So I declared in my anger, they will never enter my rest. Enter my rest. Come let us, come let us, come let us bow down before him. Come let us bow down before the Lord. Come let us, do not harden your heart. Come let us, do not harden your heart. Come let us, let us sing. Come let us sing to the Lord. Let us shout. Come let us shout to the rock. Let us kneel. Come let us bow down before him, for he is your God and your King.
Oh, come behold the works of God, the nations at his feet. He breaks the bows, bends the spear, turns the wars to sea. Almighty One of Israel.
Good evening. Welcome. Great to see you. We're having a good problem. Had to set up additional chairs. Apparently, word got out that I was speaking tonight. I don't understand it, but oh, I love it. The problem is, he always gets the last word, you know? He always gets the last word. So I don't win either way. But hey, great to see you here. This is an event sponsored by our Culture Impact team at Hope Missionary Church. And the Culture Impact team is all about raising awareness, giving you information, helping us respond to what's going on in our world and culture. So periodically just try to bring in guest speakers who can present on critical topics. And Peter is obviously a favorite around here. And always grateful when he can take time out of his schedule to be with us. Just a couple things real quick. You probably noticed there's some refreshments back there. Feel free to take advantage of that. And you can even get up and refresh your coffee in the course of the presentation if you'd like to do so. If you're not familiar with the layout of the building, there are restrooms. If you go out through these doors and turn immediately to your left, you'll see them there on the left. And I would encourage you to use those restrooms as opposed to the ones here at the front of the room. So head out the back door if you need to do that. At the conclusion of the presentation, we actually have to pick all the chairs back up. And so if a few of you strong men can stick around and help us in stacks of 8, that would expedite the process, and we'll all get out of here at a decent time here this evening. Since I don't have another hilarious video to introduce Peter this evening, I guess I'll just be nice. Teacher from Kokomo, high school teacher from Kokomo, and currently now actually serving as a pastor in a local congregation. And this guy just cranks out the material. So if you're not getting his emails, or if you're not tuning into his podcasts, it's a great source of information, and I would really encourage you to do that. We are so grateful that he can be here with us, and I know it takes time away from his family, so we're always cautious about that. And but very, very pleased that he can be with us today. Let me have a word of prayer, and we'll get Peter started, okay? God, just grateful for the interest tonight. People that are concerned about what's going on in our world. Lord, we grieve at many of the things we see in our culture, and we want to know how to respond. We want to be better equipped as your people to be the salt and light that you've called us to be in these days. And so, Lord, just work through Peter tonight, the truth that he brings us, through the power of your Spirit. Lord, I pray that it would find a lodging place in our hearts, but more than just hearing those words again, God, that we could be doers of those words and take principles out of the presentation tonight and take them into our world and apply them so that we can be difference makers for Jesus. So we just give this time over to you and pray, God, that it be extremely profitable. We know that it will, and we ask it all in Jesus' name. Amen. How about a Hope Church welcome for Peter Hepp?
Thank you. Test 2, testing. Am I on? Testing, can you hear me? Okay. I appreciate the welcome. I would have preferred just steps. I would have been fine with just steps to get up here instead of a welcome. I look like an idiot trying to climb up here. Anyway, thank you for coming back. It was a good afternoon. Do you realize your Mexican restaurant knows his order? By heart? Just walk by the table, usual, all right, and then just go back and get it. It's unbelievable. Anyway, so it's good to see all of you here. I want you to imagine for a second that you go to the doctor's office. Okay, we go to the doctor's office, which, by the way, let me just take a sidestep and say I cannot wait for the day when it comes that I can sneeze in public again and not feel like a leper. I really am looking forward to that very much. Even though I found, because I got allergies, I sneezed in the post office, cleared out that line. I was about 12 people back, boom, I was up next. So that's the way to do it right now. But anyway, so I want you to imagine now, you go to the doctor's office and you've got a runny nose. So you go in and the doctor comes in and he checks you out and looks at you and he says, I think I know what's going on here. And he leaves the room and he comes back and in his hand, he's got a box of Kleenex and he hands it to you. He says, this should take care of your problem. And then he walks out the door and you kind of sit there for a second and is that it? And then the nurse comes in to lead you out and you pay your bill, a little bit confused as to what just happened, and you leave. And about, 3 or 4 days later, you're back in the same doctor's office because you still have the runny nose, but now you got a sore throat on top of it. And the same doctor comes in and he examines you and looks and says, yep, that's kind of what I was expecting. Hang on a second. And he leaves the room and he comes back and he gives you a second box of Kleenex and a package of Halls for your throat. And he leaves and now you know the routine and you walk out and you pay your bill again for coming. About 3 days later, you've still got all of those problems and now a burning fever, so you're back at the doctor's office. And he comes in and he looks at you and you said, yeah, well, this is progressing as I assumed it would. Hang on a second. And he leaves and he comes back and he brings you a third box of Kleenex, a second package of Halls, and now like an ice pack for your forehead. If this was what your doctor was doing, is there a single person who would continue to go to that doctor? Okay, we all know it's common sense. You wouldn't have gone back after the first time, no less the second, and certainly not the third. Once it became obvious that the doctor was capable of treating only the symptoms of your problem, every single one of us would realize, I'm not going to get better because we're not addressing the core fundamental illness at stake here. Bingo. That's what I would suggest to you about what we've been doing for the last couple generations in America. We're facing all of these cultural problems, and every single one that we have, we go to the doctor's office, and we listen to our doctors, whether they're Republicans or they're Democrats, and they promise that they have exactly what we need to fix the problems that we're facing. And they leave the exam room and they come back, and in public policy, they offer us Kleenex boxes and Hall's cough drops and ice packs. And if you're not paying attention, you might not realize our problem isn't getting any better. Our problems are continuing to manifest and they're growing worse. So the suggestion that I would have is, instead of trying to take our faith and shoehorn it into a political strategy that has been failing for generations, maybe it's time for a new doctor. Maybe it's time to look at something different. when I was, I just started teaching. I just started teaching at Eastern, and I decided I wanted to get my master's degree. So I went to Ball State to get my master's, and it's not cheap, and I'll never complain about a teacher's salary because there aren't too many professions that you get June and July off, and then they tell you on foggy days, just stay home. There's not too many jobs like that, so I'm not going to complain about a teacher's salary, but I also knew it wasn't enough to pay for grad school. So I got an extra job, and I worked maintenance at the school where I taught. So during the summers, I would stay on and I would work and mow yards and stuff like that. So one summer, my boss, Greg, who was not an educated guy at all. In fact, Greg would tell you by admission he barely made it through high school, and that was only because of the people that sat next to him in class. I think you can pick up on this. But he was my boss. He was one of the best bosses I've ever had. He had given me the task of going down and weed eating along the creek that runs along the school's property. Weeds had grown up. It looked pretty bad. Now, this is going to be an all-day job. Well, I don't really want to do that, but he's told me to do it. I need to clean it up. And so I decide I'm going to use my educated brain and come up with a better idea. And instead of going there and weed eating, I got the school's push mower. And I loaded it into the back of the little green gator, and I drove it over to the start of the little creek area, and I started push mowing along that because you can take out 12 inches all at once and I can do a few zips, and I'm done in a matter of a couple hours. That was my plan. I made it about 10 feet before I heard the sound of the thump, and I looked down, and I'd hit a stump that I hadn't seen because of the weeds, which is probably why Greg had told me to weed eat, and I tore the blade clean off the bottom of the mower. This wasn't just a chip in the mower blade. I ripped the blade off of the bottom of the push mower. So I think, well, this isn't good. I can't really mow with this. And I put the mower back into the back of the gator along with the chunks of blade, and I start driving back to the high school so I can show them what I have done. Problem was, I didn't tether the mower down in the back of the gator. So as I'm speeding along the road there, I get up onto the curb to go onto the school's property there at the high school, and the mower inexplicably just decides to leap out of the back end of the gator, and it shatters all over Harrison Street. So now it's just sitting out there, and I realize I've got a mess, and I'm out there trying to direct traffic with one hand and pick up the mower pieces with the other. I get on my little radio and I say, Greg, we got a little problem here. And he came back and said, what's the problem? I said, well, you come on out here to Harrison Street and you're going to find out. And so he came out, and this scene played out so many times in the years that I worked there for him. He pulled up in his blue Dodge Ram, and I can see it to this day. He gets out with his cowboy hat and his Dudley Do-Right sunglasses, and he walks over and he tips the glasses down like this. He looks at the mower and then looks up at me, looks back down, then back at me, and just says, master's degree, huh? And I said, yes, sir. And then he spoke to me, and I've heard this so many times, probably the truest words I have ever heard in my entire life. He looked at me and he said, Pete, you proved to me time and time again that educated don't mean smart. And I'm telling you, friends, when I look at the state of American culture, those words have never been truer. You stop and you think about all of the experts that we have in our society, so many brilliant people that they know so many things about so many topics. And if you ask them, they'll show you all of the alphabet soup after their name and all of the distinct places and wonderful universities that they've attended and that they've gone. So many brilliant people somehow manage to miss what I believe is an obvious connection between the cultural crises that we face and the moral breakdown that is at the heart of all of it. We started out this morning talking about how internal moral restraint and moral principles are critical for a free society. Well, the tendency is to point the fingers at the radical secular humanist left and say they're the ones that don't appreciate this. But even conservatives miss this, so-called conservatives. This state used to have a very conservative governor that a lot of people wanted to become president. His name was Mitch Daniels. Mitch Daniels, now the president at Purdue, doing great things over at Purdue. But you'll remember it was Mitch Daniels that infamously called for a truce on the so-called social issues, as though the progressive left is even interested in calling a truce. The truth is, when one side calls a truce on social issues and the other side is not interested in calling a truce, well, what you have is not a truce. You have a surrender, is what you have. And the fact of the matter is, as Mitch Daniels said, well, we got to get our budget and our monetary problems in order, and so we just need to agree to get along for a little while on these social issues, these cultural issues, on, as he put it, issues of morality. We just need to get along on those while we deal with the economic issues. Can I tell you what that makes me think of? And I really like Mitch Daniels. But I'll tell you what that makes me think of. When I was in Little League, I'm not telling you anything that you don't know just by looking at me. I was awesome. Would you can it? Anyway, congregation takes after your minister. Anyway, so I was the pitcher. I was an okay pitcher. I wasn't a rock star. I wasn't going to the major leagues. But one particular day, I was terrible. I could not throw a strike to save my life. I'm throwing ball after ball. I've walked in run after run after run. And my manager of the Little League team, Alan was his name, he was a portly fellow who I believe was interested in coaching the Little League team because the coaches got free concessions. I honestly to this day think that's why he signed up for the gig. But he is sitting in the dugout as I am walking batter after batter, and he is just, between nacho bites, shouting out his bits of wisdom to me, and this is what I kept hearing. Just rock and fire, Pete, just rock and fire. I don't even know what that means, to rock and fire, but that's what I'm supposed to be doing. So I'm continuing to walk batters, and then he stands up, comes to the fence, and puts his hands on the fence like this, and he got my attention. He said, Pete, just throw the ball. Don't aim it. Don't aim it, just throw it. And I'm sitting there thinking, man, I'm trying to put the ball across a little plate, and you want me to just rear back and hurl it? Well, I've got nothing to lose. I'll just try it. And I reared back, and I didn't aim it one bit. I just hurled the ball, and I hit the batter. But I didn't hit the batter who was up to bat. I hit the batter in the on-deck circle who was waiting to come up to bat. And here is the most tragic part of that story. My family, my mom and dad filmed everything when I was a kid because video cameras were kind of new, and so Dad had that monster camera on his shoulder. I remember when I went to college, I came out of the shower the first time, and there was Dad. Hey, how did it go? Anyway, okay, I'm exaggerating there, but he did film that game, and I remember still seeing those umpires talking to each other. Do we give the guy his base? Because technically he wasn't up to bat, but he did get hit by the pitch. They don't know what to do. They're Little League umpires. And that right there is what I think of when I see this. We're not aiming the ball at anything. We're just throwing it, hoping that maybe we'll land a strike. We have blind boxers out in the darkness hurling punches, hoping that maybe something they do, something they say will accomplish something. And the truth of the matter is they haven't gotten close, and they're not getting close. Why? Well, we got to fix our economic problems before we fix our moral problems. Can you tell me what it is that causes debt? Whether it's in your personal life, or it's the life of a church, or the life of a state, or the life of a country, what causes debt is a lack of stewardship. And a lack of stewardship is what? It's a moral problem. You see how this works? And what is it that causes exploitation in the marketplace? People being abused in the marketplace. Is it not greed and self-indulgence? And what are those? Those are moral problems. Do you see here we're talking about we got to agree on moral issues so we can deal with our economic issues. But the heart of our economic issues are moral problems. That's what I'm getting at. This is what you need to get and grasp as Christians. People who are truly interested in solving our economic problems are not those who call a truce with immorality. It's those of us who are willing to confront immorality, expose immorality, and defeat immorality. And isn't that where the church is supposed to be, what we're supposed to be calling people to? And the same is true, it's not just economics and debt. It's not just the workplace and Enron and Ponzi schemes. Every issue that you point to in our culture, I believe we can tie back to a fundamental breakdown in our moral fiber as a people. I teach in public high school, and I don't take offense when people say we have failing schools. If the job of a public school system is to produce productive citizens, then by every standard that you could use, by every reasonable measure that you would use, then the system's failing. It's not working. Our incarceration rates are higher than they've ever been before. The dropout rate is higher than it's ever been before. The question isn't, are schools failing? The question is, why are schools failing? And if you listen, the experts will give you the answers. And they'll say, well, it's bad teachers. Well, I don't doubt the fact that there are bad teachers. There are bad everything in every profession. There are bad lawyers. There are bad doctors. There are bad politicians. There are bad preachers. There's bad people in every profession. But the truth of the matter is, it's not endemic. It's not the source of the problem. Maybe in some places that's going on, but that's not what is causing the issue. Well, you do realize, right, that if George Washington resurrected himself and came back to life, he could not teach American government in a public high school because he wouldn't be qualified. He hasn't taken enough courses and classes. Yeah, there are bad teachers, but that isn't the heart of the problem. Teachers unions say it's the lack of money. We got to throw more money at it, despite the fact that we spend thousands of dollars more per student than we have ever spent before. Are there schools where there needs to be more money infused into what they're doing? Yeah, there's places where buildings are falling down. I get that. But is it endemic? Is it the source of the problem? No. And some people will say, well, it's poor technology. I just laugh at that. I mean, at my school, for the last 10 years, we've been handing every kindergartner through senior in high school an iPad. I don't know if your school system has these one-to-one initiative where they have this, and certainly now in the era of COVID, we're doing Zoom classes, and technology is everywhere today. One of the things that I laugh at is whenever I have a problem with my iPhone or a problem with my iPad, Jenny and I, what do? Give it to our children. Boop, 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 done. It's so frustrating. I want to wring their little necks every single time they do it. You're 11 years old. How do you know how to do that? Maybe this is a problem in some places, but it's not endemic. It's not the source of the problem. So what is it? Well, maybe, I covered up that there, didn't I? Maybe there's something more than that. How about this? It's just one piece of anecdotal evidence, but go with me. I did a parent-teacher conference a few years ago. And this dad came in, and his son was doing very poorly in my class. But it was unlike most of the kids that do poorly, where it was obviously a lack of effort and they're just goofing off. And I said to the dad, I can't reach your son. Like, I've tried all of the things that I typically do. I've given my best Jerry Seinfeld. I talk to him in the hallway. I do all that stuff, all of my typical stuff. And I can't connect with him. Is there something going on that I don't know about at home that maybe could explain some things? And he said, well, it's interesting that you ask. Yes. His mom, my wife, left us about 2 months ago, and she moved to Georgia with her boyfriend. And right now we're in a custody battle. She wants him to come down to Georgia and live with her. He wants to stay here with his friends through the end of his junior year and his senior year. And that day that he got a 7% on your test, a 7%, that day that happened, the day before, my wife's attorney had him in tears on the witness stand. I'm supposed to make that kid care about George Washington? His life is falling apart around him. Look, if you want to solve the problems with American education, how about we solve the problems with America's families? And when you do that, then things like this will fall into place. It isn't this stuff. Is this an issue some places? Of course. But what is at the heart of it is a breakdown in fundamental families, familial relationships, the breakdown in morality that's occurring across our society. Besides the home, there is no single greater influence in making productive citizens and shaping the next generation than our school system is today. We can pretend that that's not the case, but it is. I remember, and so how do our schools do it? I remember when I was in junior high, please tell me this never made it over to Bluffton. Quest class, we all had to take that in junior high. It was a personal journey to discover yourself. I didn't even realize I was lost, but apparently I was, and I needed to discover myself. Do you know what this class was? This class was to make us appreciate our self-worth as human beings. And here's what we did in that class. I remember 2 exercises. One of them was we all sat in a circle, we wrote our name in the middle of a paper, and we passed it around the circle, and everybody had to write one nice thing about you. Oh, that's great. It's a wonderful little exercise, real encouraging, until you get your paper back and the girl that you're interested in writes on there how you're just like her little brother. Okay, wait a minute. I know I wasn't a big guy in junior high, but we're in the same class. Why are you calling me little in the first place? And second of all, I don't want to be a family member with you. I want to marry you, okay? And I believe this is true love. That thing did more to destroy my self-confidence than anything that happened in any of my classes. And then the other one. We had classroom role play activities that we did. Oh, that was fun. One in particular was the self-esteem balloons. I'm not making that up. We had balloons and we had a script. And you went in front of the class and you would go through this script, and every time someone said something complimentary to you, you blew up your self-esteem balloon a little bit. And if somebody insulted you, you let it out a little bit. This is a junior high class. What did that devolve into? Everyone insulting everyone else so that you can make the flatulent sound with your balloon. That's what that class became. And this is what we're doing to try to shape and mold the next generation's ideas about their self-worth and their identity. It's a joke is what it is. We have to do better. Our problem is that we are trying to teach kids to find the answers to life within themselves. We say that all the time. Guidance counselors, well, you're struggling, look within yourself. Well, why would you look within yourself? You're the one that's confused in the first place. So if you're looking within yourself, you're never going to find it. They aren't God. The answers are not found in here. The answers are found out there. And if our schools are teaching the exact opposite, and they are the major directors of the direction that our culture is going to go and the next generation, you certainly see the problem. The very places that kids are going to try to learn answers, the more confused they will be. They've never been so confused. By removing the notion of a divine authority that presides over the destiny of nations, we are crippling their character. And their character is the single greatest factor in any meaningful education. If character isn't at the heart of it, the rest of it falls apart. So what do we need to do? Well, here's the truth. We may not like to say it, and we get people really uncomfortable, but as Christians, we don't care if people get uncomfortable. The teaching of young people needs to be infused with the recognition that there is a moral authority over the universe. And that includes over them as well. Students should know there is a transcendent authority that presides over the destiny of men and of nations. They should know that they are accountable, yes, in this life for your actions, but you are also accountable in the next life for your actions. They should know that character matters more than anything else. They should know that they are responsible for themselves, and they have great freedom in this country to make the most of the opportunities that they've been given. They should know that their bodies are temples, that they should be treating with the utmost dignity and respect. Why? Because they bear the image of the Creator God. That's why. Do you know how lost that is in our society? This whole idea of the intrinsic worth of humanity. What do the socialists teach us? The socialists teach us, and I'm a big believer that there's a lot of socialists running around that don't even realize that they're socialists. What do they teach? That the value of human life is how you serve the collective. That's what socialists care about, is the collective. They use the analogy of an engine. I don't know if we've talked about this before when I've been here, but I am missing that male testosterone chip that makes me really dig cars and understand them. I don't have that at all. I'm always afraid when my car has problems. I don't want to pop the hood because it'll void the warranty. I don't know how all of that stuff works, but I remember my car did break down one time on Interstate 69, and I pulled over like you're supposed to, and I popped the hood like you're supposed to. I went out and I looked, and there it is, put the hood down and then called somebody. I have no idea what's happening under there. But anyway, here's the one thing that I do know, and I've gotten this from commercials. I know what a piston does. A piston goes up and down. That's what it does. All day long it goes up and down, and it going up and down helps the engine to work. So let's take the socialist analogy. Why is my life valuable? Because my job in an engine, the societal engine, is to be a piston. And so it functions because people like me are doing our job of going up and down all day, right? And you have a different job in the engine, and you have a different job in the engine. We all have our different parts that we play. So what makes our life valuable? Well, the engine doesn't function properly unless we're all doing our part. We need so many doctors and lawyers and teachers and taxi cab drivers. All of these things serve the collective. That's where we're basing our notion of self-esteem. Well, you answer me a question. What happens in your engine when the piston breaks its connecting rod? What do you do with it? Do you leave it in the engine? No. You take it to the mechanic, the doctor, to fix it. And if you can't fix it, you take the piston out and you replace it. You throw it away because its continued presence in the engine is a drag on the rest of the engine, and it harms the production. Do you see a problem when we start treating human life as something like that? That if a certain part doesn't fit into the machine anymore, we just remove it and throw it away? That's the way we're coming to treat human life. Listen, Christians, this is what we know that the world doesn't. Life is not valuable for what it does. Life is valuable for what it is. It is a being that bears the image of Almighty God. That's where your source of intrinsic value comes from. Can you imagine what would happen for a second if we started teaching the youth of America that truth? It really is amazing when you stop and consider that we're not doing that at all. They should know that justice is an eternal imperative that they cannot escape. Even if they think they do in this life, they can't in the next. Young people should know that though perfection can never be reached, we have the incredible privilege to constantly pursue the one who was perfect himself. A rigorous pursuit of that. They should know some ideas are better than others. And that's a radical idea these days. The multiculturalists hate that idea, that some ideas are better than others, and we should embrace the better ideas and discard the bad ideas. It's a radical idea in our culture today, but it's the truth. They should know that after studying all of the various belief systems that existed, there's a reason our founding fathers chose the Judeo-Christian model. They should be posed with the reality that Muslims find it safer to live in a country founded upon Judeo-Christian principles than they do in countries founded upon Islamic principles. Why is that? Why is it that atheists and humanists find it safer to live in a society founded upon Judeo-Christian principles than in civilizations founded upon atheistic humanistic principles? Why would that be? These are the conversations we need to have, and we better realize that the only way young people are going to know these things, and listen, I'm just laying out the strategy for you right here, we need to flood and overrun the public school system. Now listen, I want to be very cautious about this because as a dad, I am firmly aware of my biblical imperative. My job is to raise my children in the fear and the knowledge of the Lord Jesus Christ. And if me doing that is constantly being thwarted by what's happening at school, my job, get them out of there. Get them out of there, teach them at home, teach them in a different school system, put them in a different public school or a private Christian school. My first obligation is to raise my children to know the Lord Jesus Christ. And if I'm battling a public school, get them out of there. Okay, that's principle number one. I'm a huge proponent, even as a public school teacher, of homeschooling in private schools. However, Christian adults, we may remove our own children, but Christian adults should not abandon the system. You and I can't walk away from that. Christian adults have to be wiser than that ourselves. Why? Because the reality is, whether we like it or not, over 90% of the next generation will be raised and taught in that school system. They are the ones who are going to be teaching the next generation. And if we as Christians retreat and we remove our influence, we hand the keys over to those who will take the youth of this nation and drive them over a cliff. Listen, here's what I don't like. I don't like the missionary child approach. We send our Christian kids into the public school system as a light. Okay, missionaries train before they go to the mission field. They train to know the language, they train to know the culture that they're going into, and a lot of times Christian kids are not properly equipped and trained to go into the public school system that is absolutely opposed to everything they believe, and consequently what happens? The vast majority of the time, the ungodly pull the godly their direction rather than the other way around. However, with Christian adults, that's something totally different. With Christian adults who have that firm grounding, our influence needs to be there. I believe in a surge strategy. That's what we need to be doing with the public school system. Run for school board. Yes, all of you. Well, I don't have any kids in school. I don't care. Run for school board. All of the, I went too far, didn't I? Seek administrative positions. They're available. Schools are looking for those. Be on the library board, for crying out loud. How about volunteer for textbook adoption teams or fill the paraprofessional roles at schools? Take a teaching assistant job. Join the cafeteria staff. Everybody loves a lunch lady. Serve as hall monitors. Participate in the parent-teacher association. Coach school teams. They're always looking for yuppies to come along and coach those teams. They're always wanting bodies for that. Volunteer for assistant coaching positions at the high school level. Take on the music program openings. Snatch up every teaching job that is available. And when Christians overrun that system, behind those walls, we become the voice of the American classroom. That's how Christians do it. There's no grand secret to all of this. It's exactly what the humanists have done for a generation or two or three. And they are completely aggressive. They're completely unambiguous about what they're doing. And we should be no different. They want the lectern so that they can whimper out the lie of Satan from the Garden of Eden. Kids, do your own thing, be your own God, and everything will be great. You and I should wrest that lectern away from them and proclaim this truth. In everything that we say, in every way that we act, there is a God, and you aren't Him. That is a message that needs to be heard. All right, so failing schools, just like economics. Heart of it, moral problem. What about this? Divorce. I just did a wedding yesterday. It's so weird for me to do weddings. These were former students. So weird for me to do a wedding and realize as I'm looking at a couple that according to statistics, they got a 50% chance of making it. 50% of all marriages in America now end in divorce. 50% of all marriages. And that is a shocking number, but I'll tell you what shocks me. It isn't that 50% of marriages crumble, it's that 50% of marriages make it in America today. That's really the most shocking thing about it, because our society has cheapened love to the point that all it is are romantic lusts and urges. Romantic lusts and urges is now what our young people and our younger generations refer to as love. The actual concept of what love is totally lost on an entire generation. And why? We've turned these lusts into competitions. And some of you, I know it's your guilty pleasure, you watch it on TV, don't you? You do. We have evolved from courting. You do remember what courting is, right? Yes? Now, for those of you that aren't old enough to know what courting was when a young man became interested in a young woman, and so he went over and expressed that interest to the young woman's parents, and the young woman's parents said, all right, yeah, you can court. So they sit there on the front porch under the watchful eye of mom and dad, and they talk to each other. And then the boy goes home, and he comes back the next week, and under the watchful eye of mom and dad, they sit on the front porch, and they talk to each other, and then he goes home. And he comes back the next week, and under the watchful eye of mom and dad, they talk to each other, and he goes home. And this process goes on for about 16 years. And at the end of that time, then mom and dad let them go down the street and get a soda pop and then come back and drink it while talking on the front porch. This was the idea of courting, and what came of it? You had young people that got to know each other on an intellectual, philosophical, moral plane, not physical. It was all of those other things to see if there was compatibility, if there was a relationship that could form based on friendship. That's the way courting used to be, but that's not what we have anymore. Now how are relationships started? They're started on Snapchat. I send a picture to you, you send a picture to me, we both find each other attractive, boom, relationship. And we take 25 minutes to make sure that our hair is exactly as it should be for the picture. Can you imagine, those of you who are older adults, starting a relationship through simply sending pictures and maybe 10 words on a screen to somebody else? Starting relationships through texting, 280 characters or less on Twitter, back and forth, and that's how we do this. That's a far cry from courting. We've evolved from courting in our understanding of love to this. I know some of you watch it, and it is somewhat humorous to watch these people. And why? Because we all know this is not real life. You take one dude and you surround him with like 20 attractive females that are about his age, and you put them in these exotic locations, or one female and 20 dudes. You put them in all these exotic locations where they don't pay for anything. They're living like they're millionaires. You jet them all over the world to these exotic locations. You give them helicopter tours of things. They're simultaneously forming deep relationships with 7 or 8 different people. And that's somehow what we consider love to be. That's not even close to real life. If they want me to count this as real life, send the bachelor and one of his dates downtown Chicago and let me see him get mugged. How that turns out, that right there is real life. Does he shove her towards the mugger and run away? That's how we know what kind of relationship this is. And I'm making a joke out of this, but I want you to understand that we have all the commercials. It's Jacob's shot at love. It's Teresa's moment of finding love for the first time. Are you kidding me? Jacob and Teresa aren't in a competition here for love. What is the competition? But I want you to recognize your children think courting is stupid, and they think that is romance. That's why I'm saying to you, it is shocking to me that 50% of marriages actually survive, because we've totally undermined the concept of what love is. Think of the voices of love that we listen to. When I was younger, I was teaching. I was sitting in my apartment. I was flipping through the channels, and I stopped on MTV. That's music television. I don't know at what point MTV stopped showing music on music television, but they don't do that anymore. It's just like this weirdo teen programming. But anyway, they were having a town hall with a bunch of preteens and teenagers, and the topic was, what is love? Now, if I would have known then that I was going to write books and do seminars and all of that stuff, I would have recorded this so that I could get the quote exactly right. I'm not trying to misquote her, but do you know who the expert was that MTV brought in to talk to all of these preteens and teenagers about what love was? You know who it was? It was the fading pop starlet, Britney Spears. Britney Spears, who had been divorced 3 times by the age of 25. She's going to talk to these kids about what love is. So what does she say? Again, I can't remember the exact quote, but it was something along these lines. Well, love is all these mixed up feelings, and you got to be really careful, kids, because you might wake up one day and find that you're not in love anymore. And that was it. So that's it. That's what love is. It's feelings, and if my feelings change, then I must not be in love anymore. Well, I apply that to my own relationship. I remember when Jenny and I were first married. I remember the way that we interacted with each other. I remember that we would try to wake up before the other one would wake up so we could get into the bathroom and comb our hair and brush our teeth so we didn't knock the other one out. I wanted her to think that my breath always smelled like Crest. I thought that I was really fooling her with that one, and she was going to think, man, I hit the mother lode there. That's what I was counting on. All right, that was when we were just first married. Man, it doesn't take long, and it's not like that anymore. I mean, fast forward a couple years, and what is it? I wake up in the morning, and she's half on the bed, half off the bed. The retainers popped out of her mouth. She's got drool running down the side of her cheek and baby vomit on the shirt from the night before. And I will tell you gladly that the feelings that I had in that moment were much different than the feelings that I had when we were newlyweds. So according to Britney Spears' definition, does that mean that, well, Jenny just doesn't do it for me anymore? I don't have that feeling for her anymore. So now I need to go and find someone else where I can have that newness and that excitement, because that's what love is. Do you know how many marriages have collapsed on that kind of an idea? People go to work and they're tired of their life at home, and there's somebody there that they connect with, and they have these feelings of lust that they haven't felt in some time, and they confuse that for being love. And then what do they say later? Well, I didn't intend for it to happen. It just happened. We didn't mean to fall in love. We just fell in love. Oh, stop it. People don't fall in love. You fall off of a bicycle and fall into a toilet, and you fall into holes, but you don't fall in love. What you've done is you have emotional reactions. These are emotional lusts that you're feeling, and our society has confused that with what love is. So what is love? Well, let me give you a different voice that I heard. When Jenny and I got married, our church, the ladies' women's council, had a shower for us, a wedding shower, and I got to go to it. All right. Anyway, so after we got done with all the fun games that we got to play, are you picking up on the sarcasm? Because I'm laying it down pretty thick. Anyway, when we got done with that, this was really neat, and I'll never forget this. All the ladies sat in a big circle, and they went around and they gave us one piece of advice for how to have a happy marriage. And it was so funny. It got around almost to the end of the circle, and there was little Rebecca sitting there. Frail little 90-year-old Rebecca. And all of the good answers had been taken. She didn't know what to say at this point. And I remember seeing her mind turn, and she's trying to come up with something. And eventually, after what was an uncomfortable pause, Rebecca looked at us and just said, Peter and Jenny, all I can say to you is just fight through it. And I got to tell you, that wasn't the most encouraging thing to me. I was thinking I'd be bounding on the back of a unicorn through the forests of hope, and they'd all be cheering me on. And here she's making it sound like it's going to be the gauntlet that I'm about to run with my wife. Can I tell you, though, that until she and her husband died, Bob died a few months before her, that Bob and Rebecca Ellis had been married for 70 years. 70 years. They were both in the nursing care. It was assisted care, nursing home, but it was the assisted care facility. It was more like an apartment. But Bob was too frail, so Rebecca took their 2 single beds and pushed them together so that they could hold hands every night. That's how Bob left this world, by the way, holding the hand of his bride of over 70 years. Pretty sure that Rebecca's earned the right to be heard on what love is. And what is Rebecca saying to us? The very thing that we as Christians need to understand and need to preach to the world, that marriage and love is about a commitment of the will. It's not about mixed up feelings. It is worth fighting for at any cost. As a demonstration to the world of that relationship between Christ and His bride, that's what marriage is. That's what love is. You and I, just like freedom, you and I know that better than anyone. That's the testimony we need to be giving. We don't find political solutions to the divorce problem. We tried that. Let's throw out no-fault divorce, see if that helps things. That just sped up the divorce process in America. We find the deeper meaning in it as believers. How can we be surprised at the results when our culture goes down this path? We've walked away from the biblical idea of the two becoming one flesh. That whole idea is completely lost on us. I'll never forget, I was in high school, 17 years old. I come down the steps to get ready for school, and I wander into the kitchen, groggy, half asleep, and I noticed over on the coffee pot, there was this Post-it note. Now, I don't drink coffee. I've never been into coffee. Can you imagine if I did? Just, whoa! Anyway, it'd be a lot of fun. But I've never been into coffee. So I knew that Post-it note was not for me. But it's sheer morbid. In fact, I knew what it was. I knew that Dad had gotten up early to go to work, and he had left a Post-it note on the coffee pot for my mother. I knew that that's what that was. And it's like a train wreck. I don't want to look, but I was compelled to look. And I found myself walking over, and I looked at that Post-it note. You know what it said? This is what it said. It said, "Lisa, I find you more stimulating than caffeine. Love, Bill." Let me tell you something that I do not want to read as a 17-year-old boy. It has everything to do with my dad stimulating my mom, all right? Or being stimulated. But I don't want to read that. I skipped school that day and I signed up for counseling. I'm still going. I wake up in cold sweats in the middle of the night. But the truth is that notes like that were not uncommon in my home. I always saw my parents expressing affection to one another. I never saw them fight. I know they fought. I've learned about it now. Every couple fights. You mean you take two sinners and you put them under the same roof and make them live together with all of the differences between men and women? Of course there's going to be conflict. But I never saw it. I never had to grow up with the fear that my mom and dad might split up. Do you know what a blessing that is to give to your children? That they don't ever have to worry about your home splitting and separating. I tell you, there's a lot of reasons that I love and respect my dad. That there's nobody in the world I want to be like more than him, but there is no greater reason than for the way that he loved my mom. What an incredible example that was and is for me and my brother as we love our wives. What an incredible example and gift he gave. I joke about that note, obviously, but I also know after teaching for 19 years, there are millions of kids that would do anything to see a note like that. Would do anything to see that their parents expressing affection to one another instead of what they always hear, which is anger and bitterness and contempt for one another. You see, that's the reality. If you and I are serious about love and about marriage, then we need to start enlightening our own and strengthening our own with these biblical truths. And that means rejecting the selfishness and the pride that comes from our culture, and we cling to what it is that God told us would make it work. We are different. We are peculiar. Listen, the thing is, you all know as believers that our lives are marked by service to one another. I said this to the couple last night during the service. I said, look, as a Christian, you know you're supposed to serve your fellow man. But for some reason, we believers miss the most obvious neighbor that we're to serve is our spouse. They're the ones that we live with. Yeah, you should serve your fellow man, none more so than the person that you're living with. Wives, serve your husbands, and husbands, serve your wives. Sacrifice yourselves as Christ sacrificed himself for you. And if you do that, man, it works. It's really astounding that God's way works. Now, obviously, there are unfortunate circumstances, and some of you may be living that, or maybe you've had to live that. It prevents one parent from completing their task. Whether it's death or unintended divorce, you had no choice in the matter, but they walked out on you. Look, I'm not trying to suggest to you that any arrangement other than this man-woman nuclear family is a recipe for biblical failure. That is not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is, this is the model that God gave us and told us works best. So that should be what we're teaching people. This is what works best. If you want all of these things to fall into place, follow God's example. Follow His model. It works. So, economics, debt, all of these things, failing schools, divorce. What about family breakdown in our society? Families falling apart. So we have all of the brilliant sociologists that come along and tell us how we should solve this problem. As it erodes, what do those leaders say? They say, well, there's nothing really that special about the nuclear family. We can throw an influx of cash from the federal government into this area. We can come up with social work and social programs that will take the place of a solid core nuclear family. We can make this work. That's the solution, the political solutions that were given, despite all of the studies that show how absolutely critical a stable family is as a predictor of success. Our cultural elites preach the exact opposite. Celebrities model the practice of single parenthood as though it's some sort of goal to achieve, some sort of laudable objective that we should be pursuing. Our TV shows, they champion the idea you can just put any kind of arrangement in there. 2 dads, 3 moms, couple aunts, throw them all together, mix them, and call them the modern family. And the modern family is just as good as the nuclear family, except it's not. It's not at all. And the truth is, you don't even have to turn to the Bible to know that. This tragic statistics continue to accumulate, showing that with the demise of the nuclear biblical family, all of this is falling apart. But what do our experts say? All of those people with the PhDs in the alphabet soup, these are the growing pains of an evolving society. It's just what should be expected. Don't worry about it. It's not a evolving society. Would you say on the concept of family, we're evolving as a society? Well, I'll just take one role in a family, the role of the dad in the home. How is it portrayed today versus 50 years ago? Stop and think about this. Are we evolving when we go from the concept of a dad, like Andy Taylor, the way it's portrayed, Andy Taylor, are we evolving when we go from the kindness of Andy Taylor and the wisdom of Andy Taylor to the buffoonery of Tim Taylor? Is that evolving? Is it evolving when we go from the character of John Walton to the crassness of Al Bundy? Is that evolving as a society? Now, by the way, I want to be clear, they're hilarious. I'm not taking that away from them, but if this is what we're modeling as the man in the home, I don't think that that's a sign of a culture that is evolving in its understanding of the importance of a dad. And by the way, we didn't stop with Al Bundy and Tim Taylor, did we? No, we continued to evolve all the way to the downright perversion of Homer Simpson and Peter Griffin, a Family Guy. So again, I ask, are we evolving as a society when the model of the man in the home goes from Andy Taylor to Homer Simpson? Is that an evolving society? No, I think something else is at play here. Now, obviously, experts who are feminists step in and say, well, it's really not that big a deal. Men are not that important. Men don't function in a role that is absolutely critical that women can't do too. Men don't offer anything that a woman can't do. As if this is some sort of competition. It's amazing to me. God intends the family to play like a symphony. And it doesn't work when a symphony, the timpani, try to sound like the trombones. We have different roles, we have different abilities, we have different gifts. It's true. I mean, I understand that there are generalities and people say, well, women are the more emotional of the... It's not always true. My wife will always tell you that I'm the more emotional of the two of us, and I don't know why she says it, because it really... But anyway, there's different people and there's uniqueness to every relationship, but that's the key, that we're different and we fit together, but instead we play this like a competition. I have found that if you really want to tick people off in our society, you can write about abortion if you want. You can write about homosexuality if you want, or transgenderism. Sure, that'll upset some people. You really want to tick off the masses? Start talking about roles in the home. Start talking about man, male role, female, mom role. It's like a powder keg that goes off, even within the church, because we've come to understand all of these things through the lens of culture rather than the lens of Scripture. The folks that push for gender-neutral everything because there's no distinction between the sexes. Gender-neutral holidays. We just lost Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Before she was on the Supreme Court, she argued for the ACLU to abolish Mother's Day and Father's Day because they were paternalistic, they were patriarchal. We need to get rid of them. We shouldn't even honor parents, but if we do, it should be a Parents' Day. Sports teams. This is the craziest story I've ever seen. I don't remember if it was Delaware or Maryland. It was one of those states out east. They're all the same. Anyway, I'm kidding. Sorry, some of you are from those states, and you know it's true. Anyway, so out there in one of those states, it was the craziest thing. Typically, you see schools allowing for, if girls want to join the football team, girls are allowed to join the football team, Title IX and all of that stuff. Well, out there was a situation where there were a bunch of girls on a swim team, but the school didn't have enough spots for the boys to have a swim team. There weren't enough guys interested. So this one boy appealed on the basis of gender neutrality and Title IX and said I should be allowed to swim on the girls' swim team. And because we've gone down this path where there's no distinction between the sexes, the courts ruled, yeah, you got to let him swim. So he swam the entire year on the girls' swim team, went to the state championship, won the 100-meter freestyle state championship in the girls' 100-meter freestyle, and set a state record. Now, a couple things I have to say for this. Number one, if I am the dad of the girl that placed second, or if I am the dad of the girl who held the record and no longer does, I'm pretty miffed about that. That stinking Michael Phelps is swimming against her over here. That isn't fair. But number two, as a dude, how do you feel good about that? I've always, do you go down to the pub in 20 years and say, you know, I still hold the record in the girls' 100-meter freestyle? I mean, I don't even understand how you brag about something like that, but that's the direction that we're going, even to the point of our bathrooms. And you know the nonsense that we have over bathrooms these days, and I'm telling you, it's so weird to me that they target bathrooms, because bathrooms are the place that you see our distinctions in their most obvious form. And I'm not making a crass reference to our biological makeup. I'm talking about the way that we go to the public restroom. Women, how do you go to the public restroom? In packs. That's how you go. You turn to your friend. Do you need to go to the bathroom? I need to go to the bathroom. And you get up and go to the bathroom. Can you imagine me looking at Gary this morning and saying, hey, I got to go. You want to go? I mean, imagine. The problem is that guy would have been like, all right, let's go. But no, how do men go to the bathroom? Guys, you know this. You walk in, your head is up, your eyes are forward, you speak only if spoken to. If there's a guy at urinal number 1, you skip urinal number 2 and you go to urinal number 3, because there is an unspoken rule among men that you do not take the urinal next to the other guy. And right now the ladies are looking at the guys saying, is that for real? Yes, it's real. There is that unspoken rule that you don't do it. All right, and when my wife, this is one of the most unbelievable things to me. This has been several years ago. She went into the bathroom at a restaurant. I believe it was an Outback Steakhouse. It was scarring to me. She went into the bathroom and she came out texting a friend that she had just made in the bathroom. That is the weirdest thing in the world. Dudes that make friends in restrooms are the ones that you avoid at all costs. And here she is. That's what I'm saying. We are different. Now look, I'm making a joke out of this, but in all seriousness, we call each other the opposite sex for a reason. We are different. We were intended to be different. It is the eternal struggle for men to figure out what a woman is thinking. We don't have any idea what's happening up there. No clue. And it is the eternal annoyance for women to understand why a man thinks the way that he does. Why would you do it that way? That is the most complicated, ignorant thing I have ever seen in my entire life. And some of you are laughing because this is the truth. This is biblical. This is what it is. Pretending those differences don't exist, or pretending those differences are wrong, it cripples relationships. It cripples marriages. It cripples society. So yet again, another problem, and it goes back to a moral issue. And we can keep going. We're not going to. But issue after issue, challenge after challenge, you will find a moral ailment at the back of every single one of them. And it's not the way we're treating it. Violent crime. Well, what does our culture say? Well, we need more gun laws. Yeah, people going crazy with their guns. Okay, hold on. I don't mean to insult anybody's intelligence. And I don't know your feelings on the Second Amendment, although, given this county, I think I know. But it's okay. I don't know where you stand on that. But I think we all should be able to understand this, that someone who is a criminal does not care about laws. That's the very definition of what a criminal is, somebody that is a scofflaw. They don't accept the laws that are written. So explain to me how writing another law is going to make any difference to a person that doesn't abide by the laws anyway, and yet those are the solutions that we come up with. There's a moral issue at the heart of this. How about underage drinking? Do you know what we did? You know what our leaders did? They lowered the drinking age. That'll solve the problem. If we just lower the drinking age, then we don't have too many 19-year-olds that are drinking. We'll put it down at 18. Or maybe we can drop it to 15, which is what it is in Mexico. Then we don't have the problem anymore. Or teenage pregnancy. What's the grand solution there? It was one of the most mind-numbing interviews I ever did when I did my old radio show. I had a guy on who was an advocate for Planned Parenthood coming into schools and handing out condoms in schools. And I asked him the question, I'm just curious, what behavior do you think you're encouraging when you hand out condoms in schools? And his answer was the same. He said it 3 times after each question. He said, safe sex. I'm encouraging safe sex. I said, hold on. We can talk about whether it's safe or not in just a second. I just want to know what behavior you're encouraging. Don't describe the behavior. Just tell me the behavior that you're encouraging when you hand out a condom. Safe sex. We can talk about whether or not it's safe in just a second. We'll talk about their success rate and all of that. I just want to know what's the behavior. The behavior is sexual conduct. He never said it, but he doesn't have to. It makes no sense if you are trying to discourage a result that comes only from premarital sex between teenagers. It makes no sense to solve that by encouraging premarital sex between teenagers. And yet, these are the solutions that we're given. This is what I mean. We're going to the doctor and we're getting Kleenex boxes, and we're getting cough drops, and we're getting ice packs, and our problems are getting worse and worse to the point that they grow stronger until we have a serious issue like that. You remember Columbine? I was a junior in college when Columbine happened, and it seared into my memory because I was going to become a teacher, and this was like the first one of these that kind of started that spate of violence. And every time this stuff happens, what do you see? You see a whole cadre of experts that sit around on the news programs with their little pipes and their half glasses, and they try to understand. And I'll never forget Katie Couric on the news. She was on the news at that time, and she was saying, well, it's mindless. Why do kids not act right? Really? I mean, we teach them every day that there is no right. That there is no right and wrong. It's whatever we think. Why would kids act right when you go out of your way every day to teach them that there is no right? Why are we confused by this? And yet so many people are. Let's make this personal. What are the answers that are given? You hear those experts and they say things like, well, they played violent video games. They watched violent movies. They had attention deficit disorder. They were ostracized at school. Okay, I am certainly going to suggest to you that all of those things can feed a problem, but I'm also going to tell you that it's not the problem itself. And here's how I know that. Violent video games, my favorite video game growing up was 007, License to Kill, James Bond. I was deadly with those throwing knives. I loved that game. Some kids in college even skipped classes to play it. I, of course, was a serious student and had nothing to do with them. But anyway, I loved that game. You know what? When it came to violent movies, I watched R-rated violent movies, and it's not those with redeeming social quality like Saving Private Ryan. No, I watched the Scream franchise. I love those. I used to. I don't anymore. I can't stand them. I never want to. And Jenny loves horror movies. You should see us. It is the most emasculating thing in the world. Back when we were still allowed to go to movies, that we'd be standing in the theater and she'd be like, let's go see Saw 17 or whatever. And I'd be saying, maybe we could see The Notebook or something like that. It's just not a man. Anyway, but these movies, I saw these movies. And you want to talk about having no friends in school? My dad was in the Air Force. So we moved around all the time when I was a kid. I was constantly in new schools, having to make new friends. And for a while, I wouldn't have any friends. So I had imaginary friends. Do you remember the old movie, The Apple Dumpling Gang, with Don Knotts and Tim Conway? You may remember them. You probably don't remember Clarice, the mule. That was my imaginary best friend. I had her till I was in the 5th grade. I tied her up at my desk. 5th grade, I've still got an imaginary mule that I'm taking to school. I had issues, right? And when it comes to attention deficit disorder, the only reason I didn't have that is because it wasn't a thing when I was a kid. If it would have been a thing then, they would have said, yes, that's what he has. So why am I telling you all of these things? Because I did all of those things that our experts say are causing all of this violence. And yet I never once even contemplated picking up a gun and going into a school and shooting my classmates. Never even crossed my mind. I had ease of access to guns if I wanted them, but I never thought about it. You know what that tells me? That tells me that these things may heap fuel on an already burning fire, but it's not the fire itself. That's not what is the core problem. We need to get to the core problem. And you know who did? This is how I know we can. Because Al Gore got it right. And if Al Gore can get it right, you and I can get it right, all right? This is his memorial address to the slain at Columbine. This is what he said. In a culture rife with violence, where too many young people place too little value on human life, we can rise up and say no more. Why is this happening? Because too many young people are placing too little value on human life. So what is the next logical question? Why are too many young people placing too little value on human life? Our culture can't answer that question. You and I can. When you teach kids every day in science class that their life is nothing but a cosmic accident with no ultimate destiny or purpose, all they are is the meaningless conglomeration of molecules that came together purely by chance billions of years ago, and they evolved from the primordial soup into a hunched over monkey and stumbled across a razor and shaved and became them, when that's what you teach that their life is, when you teach kids every day that murdering an infant is a choice, and when you teach kids every day that killing off the unwanted elderly is humane, and when you teach kids every day that killing off the sick and the dying is ethical and it's justifiable, and you teach kids every day that killing themselves, suicide, is acceptable, it's even laudable if you have a terminal disease, as long as it's assisted by a physician, what have you done? You've embedded in the hearts and the minds of young people that life has no value. Why are too many young people placing too little value on human life? Because that's what we're teaching them. If you don't want them to think that way, you want a different fruit, then plant a different root. I didn't even mean for that to rhyme. That is a great phrase. You ought to put that on t-shirts, baby. That's amazing. We can rise up and say no more if we're willing, but the problem is these are the questions that are never asked, and these are the answers that are never given. Our doctors that we continue to go to are not answering these questions. They don't want to address the fundamental questions because they disagree with the fundamental solution. The heart of all of our problems is a three-letter word, S-I-N. The problem is sin. That is what always causes man problems, but there is only one solution to sin. You and I have it. Don't expect to hear it from political leaders. Start telling people yourself. That's what I'm getting at. Our leaders today are so much like what the prophet Ezekiel was talking about. They have eyes to see but do not see, and ears to hear but do not hear. And why? Because politics is about power. And when you are in that role so often, what you are concerned with is maintaining power. And this doesn't help you maintain power. We aren't concerned about power. We're concerned about building the kingdom of God, of spreading His truth. That's how we change the culture around us. It makes it up to us. And I guess I would just ask you, do you have something more worthwhile to do than this? I mean, is this not what our mission is as believers? I remember when I was in college, my professor, I guess I would call him like my mentor, I took all of his classes, Dr. Martin, he always would tell us to be sons of Issachar. Every day that we leave, be a son of Issachar. I never cared what that was. I just wanted to go to the dining hall or get back and play James Bond. I didn't really concern myself with what that was. It wasn't until I was out of college that I took the time to look it up. There is one reference in all of Scripture to the sons of Issachar. One happens back in Chronicles, and it says this, of the children of Issachar, which were men that had understanding of the times, to know what Israel ought to do. That's what he was encouraging us to be. People who understood the times and knew and know what our culture should do. Are we sons of Issachar? I look around American culture, I get exactly what he's saying. We're living in a society that embraces evil and calls it good, that kills its children and calls it choice, that embraces depravity and calls it expression, that celebrates perversion, that the Bible calls perversion and names it tolerance. We excuse violence and we say that it's compassion. We mislead children in the name of education. We destroy our foundations in the name of multiculturalism. We honor greed and we simply say, well, it's ambition. That's the culture that you and I are living in. But rather than confront this march to oblivion, our government is fostering it. We're just feeding it every year because that's where the people are. So we'll keep saying what they want to hear. Rather than sound the alarms, too many of our churches are utterly disinterested. Do you know how few churches do things like this? And even those that try to do things like this, how few people they get to come? Our churches are largely disinterested. Rather than resist the coming calamity, too many of us are distracted by our own lives, our own things, and building up our own wealth and all of that than we are to the task at hand. I think in many ways America's fulfilling the words of Timothy. You remember this in the book of Timothy? The time will come, Paul says, when people will not put up with sound doctrine. Instead, what will they do? To suit their own desires, they'll gather around them a great number of teachers to say what their itching ears want to hear. They'll turn their ears away from truth and turn aside to myths. That's where our culture is. That's where I would suggest the vast majority of your peers are. You know, the number 78, that isn't exactly accurate. Barna Research dug a little deeper, And they said, we want to know not just what you claim to affiliate, because remember how they come up with 78? They call you on the telephone and say, what religion would you say that you are? Well, there's a lot of people that say, well, I guess I went to church as a kid, so I'd be a Christian. There's somebody that goes to church on Christmas every couple years. I guess I affiliate with Christianity more than any other. That's how they come up with the 78 number. Barna Research said, what is the percentage of Americans that believe that the Bible is the absolute truth of God? That it's the absolute authority, that it's inerrant, it's infallible? What's the percentage of Americans that believe that Jesus was born of a virgin, that He died on a cross, that He was resurrected on the third day, He intercedes with the Father on our behalf, that Satan is a real being with real intent and purpose? You know what those numbers are? Less than 9% of all American adults hold to a biblical worldview. And if you're a young person, less than 1% of all Americans aged 18 and under 18 to 25 hold to a biblical worldview, believing those things. This is what I'm suggesting to you. That actually isn't meant to discourage you. It's meant to make you aware of why you're going to feel uncomfortable in the world around you. There's a reason Jesus said, men will hate you because of me. There's a reason that Jesus told us that if we were of the world would love us. But as it is, we're not of the world, and so they're going to treat us like they do Him. And so often I hear Christians say, well, we just need to be the hands and the feet of Jesus, and the world will love us. If we're just the hands and the feet of Jesus, stop. What did they do to the hands and the feet of Jesus? Why do you expect to be treated any differently? Church, we decide now whether we choose to be people of myths or we decide to be people of the truth. And if we're going to be people of the truth, then let's stand on it and let's speak it. Father, I thank You for that truth, a truth that separates us from the world, a truth that we know is not going to shift from under our feet. Father, we look around at our fellow man and we see that they are as we once were. Father, we don't feel contempt for them, we feel pity. We know just as we were saved by Your grace, You also want to save them. So rather than look at those people in our culture that are walking these dangerous paths as our enemies, help us to see them as captives to the enemy. People that we don't want to defeat, but people that we want to release and set free. Father, may that be our mindset. May we engage these battles, as Your word says, demolishing every stronghold, every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. May we wage war against those things joyously and joyfully. Lord, knowing that no matter what men say of us, our reward is not in this life, but the next. When we hear those words that we want to hear more than any other, well done, my good and faithful servant. Father, that is my prayer. It's my prayer for my own life, and it's my prayer for the life of this church, that they would be Your light and Your salt in a community and a world that needs it more than they could ever know. This is our prayer. We ask it in the name of Jesus Christ, our risen and conquering Savior. And everyone said, amen. God bless you.
I'd like to just